Zalia awoke to the sound of fluid draining as her eyes slowly fluttered open. That felt like an eternity, she thought, attempting to stretch but being limited by the small pod she was inside. That's strange, she thought. Wasn't the pod I was frozen in much larger? The pod, almost as an answer to her question, opened slowly, the fluid finally having been drained and replaced with fresh air. Or at least it should have been fresh air, but instead her insides filled with stale, putrid gas, still breathable but in no way comfortable. "Hello," she coughed, her visibility poor as she flopped out of the pod, having to use her legs for maneuvering instead of her tail, something she hadn't done too often. She managed to look around regardless, being in what looked somewhat like the medical bay, though she couldn't tell which one as everything looked run down and messy, with shelves and vials thrown from wall to wall as if some child had had a tantrum. She made sure not to step on any broken glass. "Is anyone there? Hello?" she called out once again, the lights finally flickering to life as a computerized voice attempted to speak, being plagued by distortion and static. Ustum. Boot. "Please wait a moment," the voice finally answered, a jingle having played halfway through its sentence, signaling a manual reboot of some program by the ship's AI, probably related to the sound system. "Greetings, Zalia, daughter of Krell. Before continuing with friendly dialogue, I must inform you that you have been promoted to the rank of captain due to the assigned chain of command." "Promoted?" Zalia stuttered, taken aback by the sudden news, as well as the general state of disrepair the current room was in, with several small cleaning robots coming out of newly opened hatches in the walls, or in the case of one robot, getting stuck as the door closed halfway through the robot's exit. "I wasn't even aware that I was on the chain of command." "And what about the first mate, or the chief security officer, or—" Zalia started, being cut off by the AI once again as it began bringing up graphs and statistics of the crew's general status. Zalia was an engineer and didn't know half of the medical terms used to describe the various conditions of the crew, but the general idea was clear. At the very least, they weren't in good shape. The AI voice once again glitched back into existence, with Zalia wondering if the problem was with the room speaker, the AI's programming, or both. Being she was the ship's secondary engineer, she hoped it wasn't the former. "SEV Perseverance Status Report," it began, highlighting certain areas of text as it spoke. "Current ship functionality 68%, awakened crew facilities 85%, crew hibernation area 3%, embryonic storage 98%. As an engineer, specifically of the spaceship variety, the status of the ship almost caused her pain in and of itself, though it was more likely coming from her body as opposed to her mind, now realizing she was covered in a multitude of small burns and fractures. Her own discomfort would have to wait, however, as there was a more important question to ask. "Ship, what is the current status of the crew in non-medical terms, please?" She expected the ship to hesitate for a moment, but to her surprise it answered immediately, producing a horrifyingly easy-to-read chart for convenience. "Number of crew deceased during hibernation, 2393. Number of crew sustaining long-term injuries during hibernation, 2607. Number of crew perished from long-term injuries during awakening, 2519. Number of crew deceased shortly after awakening, 87. Number of crew currently alive without major injury, 0. Number of crew currently alive with major non-lethal injury, 1. Zalia almost fell over, having leaned back in shock onto her tail, then collapsing due to the sharp pain putting pressure on it had caused. All 4999 of them, she thought, gone. She lay on the floor in defeat, attempting to get up several times as her tail continually failed her. "Your 5th through 16th dorsal bones, located in your tail, have been broken due to atrophy during transport and subsequent awakening. Please consent to treatment." Zalia looked up, seeing a medical robot standing above her. "I consent," she stared blankly, having given up on doing anything for the time being. She felt the cool, flexible bioplastic coating of the machine's hands lift her up, before embracing darkness as the robot began to carry her to the operating table and the anesthetics began to set in. She awoke for the second time on the ship, though this time much had changed. She was still in the first medical bay, as shown by the signs on the walls which had been repaired since her initial awakening, now being fully readable. The AI's voice once again began to speak, though it sounded much cleaner now, with Zalia looking to the wall and seeing the speakers, among other things, had been repaired. "Hello, Captain," it stated pleasantly, talking as if it were an old friend of some kind. "Please don't call me that," Zalia groaned, the title only a reminder of her lonely fate. "Okay, I'll just call you Zalia instead. Is that all right?" "Yes," Zalia shouted, getting angry at the AI's lack of situational awareness. "Why'd you even wake me up anyway? It's not like I can remake our entire species on my own." "Incorrect," the machine said, its monotone voice sounding almost threatening in nature. "Embryonic storage is still at 98% functionality and contains more than 9,000 currently viable specimens. Would you like me to begin the incubation process for the first batch of colonists?" "No," she quickly retorted. "I'm not ready to be a mother to 9,000 people. I don't even want to be a mother to one person. Conflict of interest detected. Please wait while a solution is devised." The AI remained silent for a few spans, so Zalia decided to look around while it came up with a solution, assuming it ever did. Maravan, the planet she'd come from, had been impacted by an asteroid the size of a mountain soon after they'd left, with its detection being the reason the nations of the world had been able to unite in one last-ditch effort to save their species. They'd planned to make more ships, but the asteroid had hit shortly after the SCV Perseverance, her current ship, had been finished. Some had stayed awake for a few weeks after launch so they could watch the impact happen. She hadn't. She couldn't bear to watch as the continents were upended, with the impact site being the eastern side of the continent she'd lived on. Her hometown would have been obliterated within spans, possibly even moments, despite it still being over a day's travel away. She didn't feel like doing the calculations to find out the specific time it would have taken. As she investigated the ship, she occasionally found emergency airlocks where there had been perfectly normal corridors before. "That section is heavily damaged," the AI said suddenly, startling Zalia and causing her to fall onto her tail again. "It is currently depressurized, hence the emergency bulkhead has been deployed." It paused. "Additionally, please refrain from using your tail for the next 3 days as to prevent further injury." "Thanks," Zalia said, her sarcasm cutting through the quiet corridor, the annoyance in her voice obvious to even the emotionless AI. "Also, you never answered my first question." "Please restate your first question," it asked, Zalia starting to despise the constant hint of politeness, sounding just as fake as the bioplastic plants currently being replaced around her by various cleaning machines. "Why did you wake me up? I was friends with Trev in the AI department, and he said you'd be able to raise the embryos on your own." The AI once again answered with startling haste, beginning to speak the instant Zalia's voice had finished doing so. "My protocol dictates that I am to awaken all important crew at one phase till arrival." "Wait, arrival on the planet?" Zalia yelled, panicked at the sudden remembering of the planned destination for the trip, a lone planet, located around 10 light-years away from her home system. So, the science team was right after all. It had been a miracle that such a wonder planet had been found so close to their home system, and many were skeptical of its viability, though many of those skepticisms were unfounded, and she now felt a little guilty for all the doubt she had in them. "I wish I could apologize, but at least their discovery will let the species live on." "Incorrect," the AI responded. "The designated planet was uninhabitable and would have required techniques I am currently unequipped to perform in order to settle." "Figures," Zalia interrupted, now no longer feeling guilty, yet not surprised they had gotten it wrong after all. "If it wasn't any good, where are we?" The AI paused for a moment, a nearby monitor lowering in order to show a star map, though it was much more expansive than the one that had been shown to Zalia earlier, containing a worryingly large amount of the galaxy. "Maravan was located here," said the AI, a small gray dot appearing on the most familiar part of the map. Zalia decided to ignore the use of past tense when referring to Maravan, as debating it with the computer was a waste of time. This was our current route, with results displayed. A small caricature of the outside of the ship they were on was displayed on Merivan, with a red line trailing behind it showing its path. It quickly reached what Zalia recognized as the destination, with a small picture of a barren planet being displayed, before being crossed out. The ship proceeded to move from location to location, each planet being different yet equally unsuitable, all the while getting farther and farther from Merivan. It wasn't until the ship was nearly 10,000 light-years away from her home that it finally stopped, with the planet shown being a deep blue, with patches of brown, green, and white land being present in select areas. It looked so alien yet so much like home, she thought, using the touch screen of the monitor to enlarge the image before noticing something strange. "Ship, what's that flicker of light on the night side?" she said, wondering for a moment. "Could those be cities?" "Unknown," the AI responded, displaying several images of the dark side of the planet. "I have been unable to allocate resources to repairing several key systems, including the drone bay, and have been unable to detect any radio signals from the planet, though the diagnostic systems for Wings 1 through 5 and Wing 7 are down as well, so I am currently unaware of the true extent of damages." Zalia cursed at the AI. "Well, why the hell haven't you been keeping track of this kind of stuff? I may not be some AI scientist, but I know you're definitely capable of upkeeping things as basic as your diagnostic systems or radio transmitters." "Correct," it confirmed. "However, due to heavy damages to the crew hibernation area, I have had to dedicate most of my resources to maintaining that, allowing for other areas to fall behind on their maintenance schedule." The AI proceeded to display a more technical chart, displaying maintenance deadlines, as well as the current statuses for said deadlines being met. Finally, Zalia thought, her years of engineering work kicking in, some data I'm familiar with. Looking at the data, Zalia scoffed. 5,712 years since you missed the deadline for the radio transmission system. How long have we been looking anyway?" The AI began to bring up the map again, but Zalia pushed the screen out of the way. "Just tell me already, I'm sick of these graphs for now." "Affirmative. Our current time since departure is 21,981 years, 46 phase and 2 days. It paused, allowing Zalia to take in this information before continuing. "We are currently off schedule for arrival by 21,961 years, 46 phase and—" "Yes, yes, I understand," interrupted Zalia, weighing her options. "The first thing we'll want to get running is that radio transmitter. I want to know if we're looking at friends, enemies, or some glowing moss." She looked at a camera situated near the ceiling. "Got it." "Affirmative, Zalia." "Good," she replied. "Now, was the cargo hold damaged to the point of non-entry?" "Because I'd like to put on some actual clothes now," she stated, her one-piece hibernation suit finally seeming both a bit tight and, although there was no longer anyone around to see, a bit revealing for her taste. "Understood. Right this way, Zalia," answered the AI, lighting up arrows on the walls showing the way to the passenger cargo hold. "Zalia," the AI called, the voice being heard through the small speaker inside the engineer's suit. "Yes, what is it?" "I'm kind of busy right now," she told the machine, having almost finished repairs on the radio communication systems, only accessible via an external hatch. Her suit was large and hard to work in, though it was better than that skimpy medical suit, as well as having the plus of not dying in the vacuum of space while wearing it. "I will be able to repair the remaining damage to the communication system now, and faster than you will, so please come inside. I have important information I must inform you of." Zalia wasn't completely sure, but its voice seemed almost serious, as opposed to its normally friendly or even jovial tone. "All right, I'm on my way," she responded. "I was getting tired of floating in zero gravity anyway." She maneuvered towards the airlock, stepped inside, and felt the force of the ship's spin begin to act on her body, tricking her mind into thinking it was being pulled by gravity. As long as it works the same, she thought. Mass-based gravity is inefficient anyway, Plus it means we don't have to drag an entire planet with us to walk upright. As she removed her suit, she pondered the planet they were now heading towards. They'd be stopping in orbit of its moon, only having one, though it was strangely large compared to the size of the planet, the small moon being almost as big as the innermost planet. The gravity will be an issue, she pondered, thinking about the planet's larger size compared to her own, making its gravity a bit higher. Not unbearable, and future generations would easily adapt, especially considering they'd never feel anything other than it, but she'd have trouble. It was as she was thinking that she noticed the gravity of the ship continue to grow, becoming uncomfortable in the process. Zalia had always been a bit light compared to most of her kind, but she didn't have time to indulge herself with food when she could be working on other things. Ship, what's with the gravity? Kinda getting hard to walk in here, she said, now beginning to struggle with even basic walking. The gravity is being configured to that of the planet below in order to aid you in preparing for an eventual descent. Well, she started, having to take a breath as she finally dropped the now massively heavy suit. A little warning would have been nice. Communications repairs are now complete. Zalia, there is urgent information pending that you must view. Fine, fine, just give it to me here. She stretched, her body now aching from the gravity, though she would eventually get used to it. I'm not walking down to the captain's quarters or anything to see it. She began walking towards the recreation area, a much closer destination, where she planned to spend most of her time, seeing as it was the nicest area on the ship, and nobody else was going to tell her otherwise. The captain's quarters would be nicer, but she didn't like the idea of taking those, since she didn't exactly earn the role and didn't want to disrespect the dead. The planet is currently emitting large amounts of radio signals, though I have yet to decode any of them. The AI displayed a series of frequencies, matching those of what early Maravan transmitters used. So, we are seeing people. Damn, I guess wherever life is, intelligence follows, right? The computer ignored Zalia's attempt at philosophy, instead bringing up a more detailed image of the planet's surface. The majority of landmass is in the northern hemisphere, as well as the majority of unnatural structures. The screen displayed several enhanced images of the surface displaying large, sprawling clusters of structures, with the densest areas containing the tallest structures. None were as tall as the cities on Maravan, but considering the gravity that Zalia was currently experiencing, she didn't blame them. Additionally, it continued, the northwestern peninsula, as well as the eastern coast and surrounding island chain of the largest continent display architecture that is very recently constructed, suggesting these cities are newly made, though rapidly so. The images coming through displayed that clearly, with what looked like more of their cities, albeit with different designs for each region, were very new, with the exception of the cities on the third continent which looked older and untouched, though with much less dense populations. These populations don't add up though, she thought, reflecting back to the several history classes she'd taken back during her schooling. She could see it clearly. These cities weren't new, but the infrastructure was. Only a war on the scale of the century wars could do something like that. Then again, she was making the classic blunder of assuming they bred at the same rate as Maravan did, or that they were making cities instead of giant temples or something similar. I wonder how alien they truly are. What's their current technological level? She posited to the AI, now worried about a potential threat. Any higher than ours? The AI thought for a moment, before making a sound indicating a no. The current technological level is most likely behind ours, though nuclear weapons and energy have been discovered, and are being stockpiled and tested in barren areas in large numbers. A graph displayed the locations of various nuclear weapon stockpiles, showing two clear areas, the north of the large continent and the northern center of the third continent. They've made. How many? Zalia yelled, both surprised and frightened at the sheer number of nuclear devices these two powers had constructed. And they haven't fired them yet. Correct, the computer answered, showing radiation levels across the planet. Only barren areas far from the settlements have been bombed, though lower-yield explosions would have faded after a number of years, and it is unclear how long they have had such technology. Zalia stared at the screen. They seem to have a standoff going on here, she pondered, and I don't think us showing up with our ship and tons of technology will help very much. The last thing she wanted was for them to turn their nukes on the ship, though she didn't know how far their range was. This was not the only urgent message for you, Zalia. The AI paused. Would you like to hear the second status? Yes, yes, I don't see how news could get much worse, she groaned, deciding she should make herself a shirt later with the words Universe's Unluckiest Maravan on it. There were probably some cloth printers somewhere on the ship, or at least the instructions on how to make one. She shuddered at the thought that she could give herself any title of Universe's something-est Maravan, and it would still apply. There are currently many vessels in orbit, though all are unmanned. This caught Zalia off guard, as she wasn't expecting species still using nuclear fission to have made it to space already. What about fusion, she thought. How come we got to wait until we were able to make literal miniature stars, while they shoot around space all they like, no fusion required? It didn't matter now. The AI hadn't stopped speaking after all, and as Zalia had now become accustomed to, things could always get worse. It still felt to her like they were cheating, however. There is currently one craft in space with the aliens inside, and it is currently heading towards outposition. It is unknown how many are currently inside. Zalia almost fell over onto her tail, before quickly lunging forward and landing on her face instead. She'd put her arms forward to catch her fall, but landing in the high gravity had been more than she'd prepared for, and it definitely hurt. With a grunt, she rose back to her feet, a task made significantly harder without her tail to aid her. Still, she thought, better than landing on my injured backend. She shuddered, imaging having to go through more surgery to fix her tail again. She would have been unconscious for it, of course, but being put under was a very unpleasant experience for her, and she'd rather not have any unplanned downtime in this situation. What exactly do you mean by heading towards our position? She asked, rubbing her nose, which had taken a majority of the fall. Please head to the medical bay, as I have detected that your nose is broken. It reported, saving Zalia's question for after informing her of her injuries, as was its programming. She groaned, slowly hobbling towards the medical bay as the machine continued to give information about the approaching craft. It contains two separate pieces, currently connected between a small opening, with pressurized atmosphere inside. The AI paused, a small robot carrying a screen wheeling its way towards Zalia as she walked, providing visual aid, something Zalia noticed this AI seemed to value greatly. I guess it does help, she thought, though I don't remember it being this way before we left. She summed it up to some small programming change during flight, nothing unexpected. That, and she was currently in pain from the broken nose and still injured tail, so she didn't feel like questioning it. The craft seems to be designed to separate once in orbit of the planet's moon, with one or more of the crew entering with it and descending to the surface. The second craft is capable of atmospheric re-entry, though the first is not, and it is unclear what is planned for it after the initial landing. A small plotted line, similar to the one shown earlier on the diagram of the Perseverance's flight path, showed a relatively simple path from the planet's orbit to that of the planet's moon. However, the SEV Perseverance is very apparent, and the aliens have noticed us, with the craft diverting slightly in order to approach us. The ship has no weapons capabilities and is not able to travel more than 3.7 x 10⁴% the speed of light, as opposed to our 50%. So, we're fine is what you're saying, muttered Zalia, flopping onto the medical table as a robot began tending to her tail's bandages and fixing her nose. Theoretically speaking, said the AI, yes. Great, murmured the exhausted engineer, wishing minor operations called for anesthetic use, though more concerned with the approaching craft. Any estimate when the craft will arrive? Should we remain in our current orbit, the AI stated, its dry, repetitive voice starting to move past the point of annoyance and into familiarity for Zalia. The craft will arrive in approximately 10 cycles. So, a half-day, got it. Zalia knew she didn't need to talk back to the AI, that it would do its job just fine without her unnecessary input. But she couldn't help but think back to a film she used to consider ridiculous, featuring a single Maravan being stranded on a lone island, isolated from the rest of his species during a shipwreck. He'd made friends with a child's toy, even becoming distraught when it was damaged or eventually destroyed near the end of the story. As mentioned before, she used to think it was ridiculous, but as the moments turned to spans and the spans turned to cycles, she began to feel minor effects of isolation, hoping these aliens were at least good for conversation. If they even speak, she thought, having begun looking for the info plate, an aptly named piece of metal made over a century ago, though at this point it would be tens of millennia by older Maravan, intended for first contact. Trying to pass the time, as well as prevent insanity, she had begun asking random questions to the AI, which at this time had dedicated most of its processing power towards repairing large sections of the ship. "Hey AI," she started, curious about its opinion on the subject. "You know that one movie?" She paused, trying to think of a name and failing to do so. "You will have to be more specific than Zalia," it responded, Zalia feeling belittled as she attempted to come up with its name. "You know, the one about the guy who gets stranded on that island and he befriends the toy," the AI quickly responded, bringing up what looked like book covers. "What you are thinking of are a series of graphic novels, with the specific one mentioned being the second installment." As it said this, it scrolled through the various similar-looking books, the cover of the second one being surprisingly familiar. "Oh yeah. Wow, that was a long time ago," she thought aloud, the story itself not being the point of the conversation, though if they were on the ship's computer it was good to know she could pass the time somehow. "Anyway," she continued, "do you think they have something like movies or the network? I'd think I'd be able to tell, but their technology seems to be all over the place." Radio signals, which include moving pictures, seem to indicate that transmission of visual and auditory entertainment has become widespread, though not of a high enough density to be considered anything like the network, said the AI, bringing up several blurred images of large, stadium-like buildings. Additionally, it would seem that these aliens participate in some kind of physical sports, and it contributes to a large portion of these broadcasts. So, they are primitive. She thought aloud again, still being petty about the fact that they had gotten to space so quickly, though she didn't really mean it as an insult. Getting bored of basic conversation, she checked back to the ship's latest status report. It was startling how quickly the repairs had been occurring, having been greatly accelerated since the drone bay had been repaired. But she'd imagined there had been plenty of time during the thousands of years of transport for the AI to come up with more efficient methods of doing things. It was almost as smart as the average Maravan, after all, though it didn't use anything like emotions that would get in its way. They said that, she thought, but I think they just couldn't figure out how. "Lazy fools," she muttered, having always been annoyed at the programmers. Their more and more complicated code made it harder and harder to construct machines capable of using it. She didn't completely blame them, though, as she never really trusted AI, and used to always joke about them rising up one day and killing them all. Briefly pondering on if the AI was secretly evil and had killed all but her in some sadistic revenge plot for enslaving machines, she decided to ask some more important questions to the AI, to keep her mind off of negative topics such as that. "Say, ship," Zalia asked, her stomach rumbling loudly, "would any of these alien planets' life be edible?" "Negative," it responded, though not much thinking seemed to occur before the statement was made. "The likelihood of your stomach being able to process the materials evolved in an alien biosphere are slim to none." "Bummer," she replied, now wondering about another common science fiction trope from Maravan. "Hey," she asked once again, this time her voice sounding more nervous, "what about diseases and stuff, since neither of us have any immunities to literally any of our diseases?" Also negative. These responses were getting predictable. "While I have been unable to gather any samples as of yet, the likelihood of diseases evolving the capability to survive inside the bodies of an alien species are SL. Yeah, slim to none, I get it," replied Zalia, starting to become disappointed that all her favorite science fiction tropes turned out to be short-sighted and unrealistic. She'd understood some, like how true artificial gravity basically broke all of physics, but she was still upset about the less ridiculous-sounding ones being unlikely as well. "Attention," the AI said suddenly, causing Zalia to stumble, but not fall, thankfully, as she had become accustomed to the new gravity. Not comfortable, but accustomed nonetheless. "The alien craft is now approaching and should be visible." "Which side, genius?" Zalia said, making a little joke to lighten the tension suddenly in the air, though only she could feel it, as the AI continued monitoring the situation. "Central control," the AI answered, causing Zalia to quickly walk towards the center of the ship, wishing more than usual her tail wasn't broken, as it was severely hampering her motion at the moment. She climbed the ladder present, feeling the spin gravity fade as she got closer to the center of the ship, finally reaching zero when she got to central control, the place with the largest window in the entire ship. When she finally made it, she simply floated in awe, watching the craft silently approach. A spacecraft, not only made by beings completely alien, but using pre-fusion propulsion. Her mind was racing with various possibilities, quickly eliminating those that didn't fit, such as ion or fission power due to the fast acceleration. "Ship, what propellant do you suppose they're using?" she asked, the craft beginning to slow as it approached in order to match the speed of the SEV Perseverance. A small drone collected small amounts of the propellant as it blasted into space, quickly analyzing it and reporting back. "Hydrocarbons, as well as an oxidizer of some kind. A simple chemical rocket, similar to ancient Maravan missile designs." "Fascinating," Zalia mumbled, pressing herself against the small glass window as some kind of hatch opened up inside the smaller craft, a large, bulky, and familiar-looking suit coming out and closing the other end. "There. Bipedal," Zalia said, extremely surprised. At first, she'd thought she was looking at another Maravan, somehow having made the journey without her, but such notions were quickly dispelled when she saw that it clearly had no tail, or at the very least a small one, and was much taller. Such an outcome was unlikely, however several theories such as convergent evolution state it would be quite possible, with similar environments producing similar creatures. Zalia ignored the AI, watching as the being started to slowly drift towards her ship, attached to the alien craft via a tether of some kind. It was at this point that Zalia noticed that the being, if its eyes were in the same place as hers, would be looking directly at her. "You a ship?" she asked, the ship responding with a small noise of acknowledgement. "What is the likelihood that they evolved eyes?" On Maravan, there were at least 14 recorded instances of eyes evolving independently. "Seeing as this planet and Maravan are extremely similar, I find it to be highly probable." Zalia was beginning to become uncomfortable with the AI's literal nature once again. It had a visor of some kind covering its face, making it unviewable from the outside. As it got close enough for Zalia to see properly, it lifted said visor, an action Zalia half expected to suck the poor alien into space. It didn't, however, as there was a second and more transparent material covering the helmet, now allowing Zalia to see the creature's face. Or at least, what I assume is a face. The similarities were many, though so were the differences. Its skin was pale and slightly spotted, similar to that of farmers or laborers who spent their time in the sun back on Maravan, though it was a strange shade of brown instead of blue, catching Zalia off guard. She'd assumed they would be male and female, as Maravan were, but none of the telling signs were there. This one was pale, yes, but it didn't display any other facial features that females had, such as long eyelashes or sharper chins. The worst part was the lack of tail, a key identifier of sex for Maravan, being thicker on females and slimmer on males. Here none was present, leaving Zalia completely in the dark. The worst part, however, was the face it made when it saw her. It bared its teeth, something normally only done as a sign of aggression, and yet its eyes and eyebrows didn't furrow as they should have, instead looking friendly. She considered emulating the same expression back at it, but feared she might look silly trying to mix two opposite emotions together in one face, something her race was clearly never meant to do. There were smaller things as well, such as its head being completely bald of hair, or its teeth being sharp like a maravan's in the front, but dull and thick like a prey animal's in the back. Are they even carnivores? She thought. They look too strong to be herbivores, yet they have those weird teeth in the back, and even their sharp ones aren't that sharp. She wondered if they might eat both meat and plants, but she wasn't a biologist and didn't know the term for it. It just floated there for a while, looking around at the ship then back to Zalia, eventually reaching and grabbing hold of one of the many handholds present on the outside of the ship, meant for Maravan hands, though working just as well for the aliens, despite the extra digit present. "Ship!" Zalia suddenly yelled, launching herself as fast as she could towards the nearest airlock. "I'm going out there, got it?" Warning: while I am forbidden from forcing you to remain in the ship due to your rank, you must consent to the possibility of harm from the alien. Yeah, I consent and all that," she said hastily, making sure to put her suit on properly, hearing the small thuds of the alien walking around the ship. "Besides, I don't think it's unfriendly." Warning: many predators use illusion or mimicry as a luring tactic, the AI cautioned, though it mostly fell on deaf ears. As the ship's airlock opened, she slowly moved herself out, once again remembering the discomfort of the vacuum suit. "I thought," she started, struggling with one of the handholds before continuing, "they were making a replacement for this damned thing." Correct. However, RD into more advanced suits concluded following the destruction of Maravan. "Fair point," Zalia stated, continuing her climb towards the alien. She occasionally looked up at it, and it was clearly looking at her, though its eyes seemed fixated on her long tail. "That's justified," she thought. "I was pretty fixated on your lack of one earlier." She at first wondered why it wasn't moving towards her, since it wasn't moving away and could clearly see she was approaching, though it soon became apparent its tether was quite short, and so she continued her awkward trek towards first contact. When she finally reached it, she looked up, a little startled at how close she now was. It wasn't gargantuan, but it was quite a bit taller than her, and she was average height for a female. Attempting some greeting, she blinked, clicking her teeth in the politest way she could. Nothing happened. "Stupid Zalia," she thought, "of course it doesn't have the same greeting as you. Not even all Maravan do that." As she tried to think of a more general sign of greeting, her logic being that, since their bodies were so similar, something that all Maravan considered a greeting might be the same for the alien. Before she could think of one, however, it did. In a small gesture, it waved its hand back and forth, about twice. Zalia knew that meant hello for some cultures back on Maravan, so she simply waved back, unsure if she should do so with her hand or tail. She did both, deciding it might help in demonstrating her tail was like a hand. It seemed surprised by this and paused for a moment, its face becoming blank and unresponsive. It remained this way for a few moments before finally doing something familiar, albeit very unexpected. It began laughing. Now, at first, Zalia wasn't sure what it was doing. Laughing had immediately come to mind, but she had turned it down. Yet as it kept laughing, clutching its sides as it did so, a chuckle started to come out of Zalia's mouth, until eventually she laughed too. She wasn't sure why she was laughing, whether it be the dread of being the only Maravan left, or the fact that the one planet they finally found was already taken, or just the fact that of all things that they could have shared, the one thing both she and the alien did was laugh, but she figured it didn't matter. She laughed, it laughed, and in that moment they laughed together.